All right, we talk easier said than done. That's how we started today to talk about that many things I think are easier said than done. I asked that today because we're going to look in our story about something that's easier said than done, and that is how we respond to grace. So today's story is going to have to do with grace. Somebody's going to receive God's grace, and they need to respond with grace. Somebody's going to see that person get grace, and they also need to respond to that with grace. So here's the thing, easier said than done. We respond to grace with grace. That's your punchline. Sounds easy. It sounds fun. We use the same word. Respond to grace with grace. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 4 different words, 5 total, right? Super easy to do. Just respond to grace with grace. No, it's actually harder, which is what we're going to talk about today. We're going to see this today. We'll see it in the story. It's going to be about a guy named Naaman is one of our focal characters. Also a guy named Gehazi. Side note, great name. That's probably one of my favorite I've come across in a while. Gehazi's cool. We're going to hear about these two guys. They're kind of the focal point of our story, but there is a third guy that plays into the story in a big way named Elisha. So I want to talk about Elisha quick because he's a huge character. He's also a big figure biblically. So I'm going to give a little backdrop on him before we jump into our story. So Elisha is a prophet of God. In 1 Kings chapter 18, we had Elijah, who we talked about last week with Mount Carmel. Elijah is told by God to anoint Elisha to become the prophet after him, basically his successor. Elijah goes, talks to Elisha. Elisha starts to follow Elijah. This is all great. Learns from him. In 2 Kings chapter 2, really awesome story. Elijah gets taken up to heaven in what is described as a whirlwind. So he goes up to heaven in a whirlwind. He's gone. It is now Elisha's turn to begin his calling as the new prophet. And Elisha has some great stuff happen early on in 2 Kings. In chapter 4, there is the widow's olive oil as well as healing of a Shumanite boy. Really cool stories to take a look at if you want. But we're going to jump to chapter 5 today to pick up our story about grace and how we respond to grace with grace. So it's going to be 2 Kings chapter 5. We'll get through the whole chapter today. It'll be right up here behind me. There it is, starting off. It's also bookmarked in your Bible. We are going to start with verses 1 through 6. So 2 Kings chapter 5, verses 1 through 6 says this. Now Naaman was commander of the army of the king of Aram. He was a great man in the sight of his master and highly regarded because through him the Lord had given victory to Aram. He was a valiant soldier, but he had leprosy. Now bands of raiders from Aram had gone out and had taken captive a young girl from Israel, and she served Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, "If only my master would see the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy." Naaman went to his master and told him what the girl from Israel had said. "By all means go," the king of Aram replied. "I will send a letter to the king of Israel." So Naaman left, taking with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 sets of clothing. The letter he took to the king of Israel read, "With this letter I'm sending my servant Naaman to you so that you may cure him of his leprosy." We'll stop there. So we have Naaman. He's an important guy. He's highly regarded in his society, but he has leprosy. Being a leper was looked down upon by a lot in the society. So Naaman's a high-ranking guy, but also has leprosy. And there's a servant girl that works in his home, and she knows about Elisha, knows Elisha in Israel, knows Elisha could heal. So she wants Naaman to go see him. Naaman decides it sounds good, goes to see his master, the king, and asks to go. And the king says, "Yeah, by all means, go ahead. I will send a letter ahead to the king of Israel as well." This was very customary at the time. So the king of Aram sending this letter to the king of Israel. Naaman also is going to take a gift along, the talents and the clothes. This is also customary when seeking an audience. Now, the letter that the king of Aram sends is addressed to the king of Israel, probably because the king of Aram assumes, hey, whoever can do this healing is connected to the royal court. So he sends it to the king saying, "I'm sending him to you to be healed." So now Naaman's going to go. Let's pick it up here, verses 7 through 10. As soon as the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his robes and said, "Am I God? Can I kill and bring back to life? Why does this fellow send someone to me to be cured of this leprosy? See how he's trying to pick a quarrel with me?" When Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his robes, he sent him this message. "Why have you torn your robes? Have the man come to me, and he will know that there is a prophet in Israel." So Naaman went with his horses and chariots and stopped at the door of Elisha's house. Elisha sent a messenger to say to him, "Go wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan, and your flesh will be restored, and you will be cleansed." So the king of Israel gets this letter, and his first response is fear. He tears his robes, which is a sign of distress and mourning. He's like, "I can't do this. By the king sending me this letter, he's expecting me to heal him. When I can't do it, he's going to pick a fight with me, a new war." Well, Elisha hears this and is like, "All right, dude, just send him to me. I got it. Send him my way." So this man of state, this king, can't do it, but Elisha, the man of God, can. So Naaman heads to Elisha, but before he gets there, he's right outside the door, it says. Messengers are actually sent out to him, and they say, go wash in the Jordan 7 times, and you'll be all good. You'll be healed. That's it. That's all you got to do. This sounds simple, right? And Naaman should just be ecstatic. But is he? Let's read verses 11 through 14. But Naaman went away angry and said, I thought that he would surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord, wave his hand over the spot, and cure me of my leprosy. Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than the waters of Israel? Couldn't I wash in them and be cleansed? So he turned and went off in a rage. Naaman's servants went to him and said, my father, if the prophet had told you to do some great thing, would you not have done it? How much more then when he tells you, wash and be cleansed? So he went down and dipped himself in the Jordan 7 times, as the man of God had told him, and his flesh was restored, and he became clean like that of a young boy. Naaman starts off annoyed. He's annoyed. Here's how you're going to do it, but he's annoyed. Surely he warranted Elisha coming out of his house and making the spectacle and waving his hand all around and healing him. Or at the very least, can I get a better river to dip in than the Jordan? Thankfully, though, his servants convince him. They're like, this is a simple thing. Like, what do you have to lose? Just go and do it. So he goes, he dips 7 times. It says he's healed. He's as clean as a young boy. God's grace was on him. And now we'll see how he responds to that grace. His first opportunity at grace with Elisha, he was very annoyed. He's upset. Now it comes through. Let's see what happens. We're going to read verses 15 through the first part of 19. Naaman and all his attendants went back to the man of God. He stood before him and said, now I know that there is no God in all the world except Israel. So please accept a gift from your servant. The prophet answered, as surely as the Lord lives, whom I serve, I will not accept the thing. Even though Naaman urged him, he refused. If you will not, said Naaman, please let me, your servant, be given as much earth as a pair of mules can carry, for your servant will never again make burnt offerings and sacrifices to any other god but the Lord. But may the Lord forgive your servant for this one thing. When my master enters the temple of Rimmon to bow down, and he is leaning on my arm, and I have to bow there also. When I bow down to the temple of Rimmon, may the Lord forgive your servant for this. Go in peace, Elisha said. So Naaman's attitude now, thankfully, does a 180. He's cured. He's appreciative. He accepts that God is God alone. And he tries to offer a gift of grace, of gratitude, of thanks. This is customary with pagan gods and false prophets to offer a gift, but Elisha does not accept it. Then Naaman says, okay, can I at least take some Israelite earth or dirt from the ground back so I can make an altar to God? He believes God is God alone, but kind of like it's only in Israel, like the God of Israel is it, so he needs to like take some of the earth, the dirt back with him. Now, he doesn't quite understand yet the soil isn't what matters, but I think his heart's actually getting there, and he's grateful. He also asks to be forgiven when he bows with his king before a different God, because that's a requirement for him. And Elisha's response is, go in peace. And this isn't a get out of here, no, I don't accept it. Go in peace is like an affirmation. It signifies a covenant relationship now. Elisha is acknowledging Naaman's belief in God, right? So all is good. We have a great story, right? Almost. Not quite done. The end of verse 19 through 27 says this. After Naaman had traveled some distance, Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, the man of God, said to himself, my master was too easy on Naaman, this Aramean, by not accepting from him what he brought. As surely as the Lord lives, I will run after him and get something from him. So Gehazi hurried after Naaman. When Naaman saw him running toward him, he got down from the chariot to meet him. Is everything all right, he asked. Everything's all right, Gehazi answered. My master sent me to say, 2 young men from the company of the prophets have just come to me from the hill country of Ephraim. Please give them a talent of silver and 2 sets of clothing. By all means, take 2 talents, said Naaman. He urged Gehazi to accept them, and then tied up the 2 talents of silver in 2 bags with 2 sets of clothing. He gave them to 2 of his servants, and they carried them ahead of Gehazi. When Gehazi came to the hill, he took the things from the servants and put them away in the house and sent the men away, and they left. When he went in and stood before his master, Elisha asked him, where have you been, Gehazi? Your servant didn't go anywhere, Gehazi answered. But Elisha said to him, was not my spirit with you when the man got down from his chariot to meet you? Is this the time to take money or to accept clothes or olive groves and vineyards or flocks and herds or male and female slaves? Naaman's leprosy will cling to you and your descendants forever. Then Gehazi went from Elisha's presence, and his skin was leprous. It had become white as snow. So now Gehazi, Elisha's servant, comes in to play more. He thinks Elisha was too easy on Naaman. He should have taken something from Naaman. Naaman owed something for this, and he's got a lot to give. He's grateful we should do it. So Gehazi chases down Naaman, and he straight up lies to him. Elisha sent me. There's these two prophets that come down the hill, and they need some clothes and these talents of silver. Naaman's like, yeah, totally. I'll take whatever you want. So he gives it to Gehazi. Gehazi gets it back to the house, hides it. Naaman's guys go away, and Elisha comes down. I just seem like kind of walking down the stairs. Hey, where you been, dude? Gehazi, I ain't going anywhere. But Elisha knew. Elisha knew exactly what happened. He's like, my spirit was with you when you went and did all of this. Gehazi was greedy. He was opportunistic. He was jealous. This wasn't the time to take any sort of gift, but he did. So now it says he and his family will get Naaman's leprosy. He couldn't handle the grace that Naaman received from God. So we have to look at how we respond to God's grace. We had Naaman who receives this amazing healing and God's grace on him. And then we saw these two very different responses. Naaman's response to the grace in his life. Gehazi's response to the gift of grace in Naaman's life. So I want to look at how we respond when God shows grace towards us and grace towards others. As mentioned earlier, we want to respond with grace, or to grace with grace. Naaman started out arrogant when he first finds out what's going to happen. It's like, why don't I get this big celebration, or Elisha come out and see me? Like, I deserve a spectacle. He was entitled when he needed to be humble. Need to see more humility. One group of people that are not known as super humble people in general are professional athletes. And I love sports, but there's two I want to talk about today real quick. A few years ago, two guys were playing in the city of Los Angeles. LeBron James, who many are familiar with, one of the best basketball players out there now, is playing for the Lakers. He still does. There was a soccer player named, great name here, Zlatan Ibrahimovic, who was playing for the Galaxy. Great player. So they're both in Los Angeles, and at one point, LeBron decides, I'm going to make a gesture to Zlatan. So he autographs one of his jerseys and sends it to Zlatan. Now, most people, if you get a signed LeBron jersey, you're taking it, be like, whoa, this is awesome. I'm excited. I'm going to frame it, put it up somewhere. This is cool. That would be accepting it with humility. What Zlatan does, he takes the jersey, he signs his own name to this jersey, and sends it back to LeBron James. Now, Kyle and I can laugh a little bit. We know Zlatan as a player. That sounds just like him, but it is the exact opposite of any sort of humility and gratefulness to this gift is entitled. I'm more important. I'll sign it and give you my autograph. We need to accept God's grace with humility, not entitlement. Don't autograph God's grace and send it back to him. That's not the way to respond to grace with grace. Keep it and be humble. So we're going to talk about humility. Humility with accepting God's grace. And part of it is accepting that we need God's grace. We have to pour out our own pride to be filled by God's grace. We can't fully accept grace and be filled with pride at the same time. They don't blend nicely together. It says in both Proverbs and then echoed in 1 Peter that God shows grace to the humble. It says, clothe yourself with humility. Put it on. Show that we're no better than anybody else, and that we can't do it all on our own, and that's okay. We need God's grace to lift us up. He cares about us, and he actually wants to give us grace. He wants to lift us up. It's not an obligation, but he wants to do it out of love. But if we're too proud to admit that we need his grace, or if we feel that we've earned it, or like we really do deserve it, that's pride, and he's actually opposed to that. It says he's actually opposed. It's okay to need help. It's okay to need that second chance from God. God doesn't write us off or cancel us or get rid of us because we need a second chance. He gives us that. It's also okay to not earn everything we receive, and that is a blasphemous statement in our society today. You want something, go earn it. Go get it. Work harder. Do it yourself. And I get where that comes from. But remember, Jesus flipped society upside down. His society, his kingdom, it doesn't need you to earn his grace. He doesn't want you to earn his grace. Don't even try to do it because you can't. But accept that you have it and accept it with humility. Humility is accepting God's grace, that you have it even though you didn't earn it or deserve it. So humility. Second way to respond to grace with grace towards us is with gratitude. And being grateful is something, I feel like it shouldn't be that hard, but it actually kind of can be. I've talked many times how I worked at a coffee shop for a number of years, and I remember this one day very vividly. We had two regulars that were coming at different times. We had a lot of regulars, and they knew each other. These two both worked in the school system. And one woman comes in, and she's paying for a drink, kind of looks to the door and sees this other guy come in. She's like, oh, hey, really quiet. Can I pay for his drink? What is it? I'm like, yeah, it's great. I loved it when people did that. So she does. Buys his drink. She leaves, doesn't say anything, just kind of smiles and says, hey. He comes up to the counter, get him his drink, hand it to him, and he goes to pay, and I don't take it. Don't take the money, and I tell him why. Now, his first response should be a big smile, and this is so great, but it wasn't. His words were, who did this? She shouldn't have done this. Why did she do that? He was skeptical. He was like almost upset. And eventually he brought himself down to just say, oh, yeah, I guess that was just a really nice gesture. It was clearly hard to be grateful for it. God already paid for our grace latte. Let's just be grateful for it and take it. Show God our gratitude. Some weeks we sing a song called Gratitude, and it says, all my words fall short. I've got nothing new. How can I express my gratitude? What can we give to the God of the universe who's just given us an amazing gift that we don't deserve? And simply put, we give him us. We give him ourselves. And I've wrestled with what this means, because this is one of those things I can easily say, but it's hard to do, and sometimes I'm not even sure what it looks like. Romans 12:1 has some advice. It says to offer our bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is our true and proper worship. Okay, that's a start. But how do I even do that? We've talked before, okay, I give money. I give resources. I give my time. I serve. I help those in need. I honor God's direction in my life. All of these are great. By all means, if you're doing them, keep doing those. Those are good things. If you're not, I encourage you to make them parts of your life. But I want to look at it slightly differently today. And that is by saying this. I want us to give God our worldview. Simply give God the way we see the world to see it the way God does. Give up the way we default to seeing things, to see things through God's eyes. Author and pastor John Mark Comer, in his newest book, Practicing the Way, has a quote that says, for Jesus, salvation, and I would add grace to this, is less about getting you into heaven and more about getting heaven into you. Seeing things in a heavenly way and not a godly way, as if heaven is your influence, not Instagram or public figures or trends, but that heaven, that God is the influence. And when we do this, the day may not look all that different from the outside, but the way you look at the outside will be different. You're still going to go to work. Okay, you don't get to quit your job because you've received God's grace. But you're not defined by your job. You're defined by God. You still work as hard, if not even harder, than you did before as a way to honor God regardless of what that job is. I'm still going to go, and on Thursday nights with Kyle, we're going to coach our kids' soccer team. But we're going to see those kids as God does, not as a team trying to just get better at soccer and win, but see these kids through the eyes of God. You're going to go socialize in whatever manner you like to, but see that restaurant, the bar, the coffee shop, the concert venue as a place where God wants and needs to be. So see it through the eyes of God. We also start seeing things that we may look past. There's a song by Josiah Queen called Things That Matter. He talks about not missing the things that matter, not just driving by and avoiding them or letting them come in and out of our minds. Seeing and praying for that accident on the Beltline that makes you late for work rather than just being frustrated that you're late. Noticing when a friend or acquaintance brings up the same thing in their life, it's because it's bothering them. This is giving up our view for God's view. So see the world through the eyes of God. That's giving him us. And when we give God our view, we also view others with the grace that he gave us. The grace he offers us, we re-gift to those around us. We offer grace to others as well. What better way to show gratitude for grace than to gratefully give grace? So respond to God's grace towards us with humility and with gratitude. So that's responding to our grace with grace. Now we got to look at it the other way. When somebody else receives grace, how do we respond? Because other people are going to receive the grace of God, right? I'm not the only one that gets God's grace. You all get it too. We have to look at our response. Gehazi did not have a great response to Naaman's grace from God. He fell into some pitfalls that we also need to watch out for. And the first one I think he did was being opportunistic, but not in a good way. He took advantage of Naaman. And being opportunistic, taking advantage of opportunities can be good, and sometimes, though, it's not such a good thing or not something we should do. To illustrate that, let's look at this. Coffee, right? Geoff's up here with his coffee every week. I love my coffee. Wednesday morning, right away at 5 a.m., I spilled my entire cup of coffee on my chair and on the floor. I should have gone back to bed and canceled the day, okay? And that day was not great. But in the morning, 5 a.m., I need my coffee. It's great. It gets me going. If I have that coffee at 5 p.m., now we have a problem. Because now I'm going to be jittery and restless and up all night and annoy my wife more than I already do. Okay? It's a problem, right? See? 5 a.m. coffee, good. 5 p.m. coffee, bad. Okay? Real simple, but sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. We want to watch out for that nighttime coffee version of being opportunistic because we don't want to take advantage of someone when they're in a good place or feeling grateful. So we're going to watch out for being opportunistic. Gehazi went to Naaman, took advantage of him. Now, it is natural for someone that receives God's grace to feel great, to be happy, to be in a good place. So we just want to not take advantage of it. We say, oh, they're in a really great mood. Now's the time to ask for something. Now they can serve, now they can give, now they can help me. And honestly, a lot of times when I've seen this and heard it, it's actually really well-intentioned. We need and want people to serve and to help. We all should, because that is a way we can give to God. But for someone else to show gratitude to God, it needs to come from them. And it's between them and God. If they feel led to serve or help or take a load off someone else, great. I'm all for it. I love it. But if we push that in a way that serves us before God, instead of pushing someone to just get closer to God or to our Christian community, we run the risk of taking advantage of them. We just got to watch out for that. We can always present ways to serve and give to God or to present needs that we have, but giving to it shouldn't come from pressure of us, but from the leading presence of God. And this one is messy. It's not fun to think about that it happens, but it does. So it's something I want us to be aware of so we don't do it and that we don't get taken advantage of. So respond to their grace with grace. Let their gratitude serve God and not us. Second one is jealousy. I think Gehazi was a little jealous of the grace Naaman got. And I thought about this one this week as I was working on this sermon. I sit in my home office, and I call it that. It's my porch off the back of my house. And we have a 3-season porch, and I love it because I can see everything, see out the backyard. And one view, as I look to the right if I'm at my desk, is my garden. We expanded our garden this year. My kids love it. It's fun. And the first thing I notice is the picture on the right here. That's our tomato plants. A little hard to see. But our tomato plants are booming right now. Like the grape tomato, cherry tomatoes, the beefsteak tomatoes, they're coming in. They're big. They got a bunch. But then I thought about the plant I was actually most excited about, which was the banana pepper plant. 'Cause I love banana peppers. That plant this year is probably half the size, and I think so far produced me about 3 peppers. And it's trying. It's got this little guy. You can see it. Here he is. Look at him. Little baby. He's coming. I'm going to get to eat that guy in like a month. It's trying. Now, if I'm that banana pepper plant, I'm jealous of how big the tomato plant is. People would gawk at that one. That's the one they'll see. But the fact is, they both matter. The banana pepper plant is actually doing great. We've taken care of it in the same way we've taken care of the tomatoes. They're not in competition. God gives us the grace we need. He gives others the grace they need. We don't want to see our grace like the banana peppers and other as those cherry tomatoes. Don't be jealous of the grace someone else has. And this is a tough one because jealousy is really hard. And I fall into this one, the jealousy one. See the grace in the life of someone else and compare it to the grace in your own life. We will easily miss the grace in our own life. We won't actually see it because we're so focused on theirs. And I think don't miss the grace in your own life. You might think, hey, I didn't get the grace in the way they did. Where's more for me? This isn't fair. It doesn't look like that for me. And then God has to have the conversation with me that I have to have with my kids about stuff like this, that it's not like that. Don't let jealousy cause you to miss the grace in your own life. We'll get grace where we need it. Others will get it where they need it. It's not going to run out. There's always enough of it. It's not going to expire. See the grace someone else got, not as something to be jealous of, but as a way to jumpstart yourself to look at the grace in your life. And then celebrate grace with each other. When somebody else receives something awesome from God, let's celebrate with them. Take joy in the grace that you and others have received from God. Be encouraged by the grace in others because it shows God's movement and it shows God's reach. God's grace is a gift to us. It's a gift to others, so we respond to it with grace. I want to wrap up with how it's a gift of grace here. The gift of grace is given because Jesus gave his life. We accept his grace by accepting that life, death, and resurrection. If you're having a hard time just thinking about the grace part, go back to the life of Jesus, the death of Jesus, the resurrection of Jesus. in your salvation, what it means, and receive his grace. And accept it in humility, that you didn't earn it, but you weren't supposed to. You didn't have to. And then be grateful. Give God that worldview. Do your best to see the world the way God does, those God goggles. See it through that lens. And then see the grace in others, not while being jealous or thinking about taking advantage of them, or even if you're doing it unintentionally. But just see the grace in others as a reminder of how far and wide and deep God's grace can truly reach. See God's grace in and around you and respond with grace. Let's pray. God, I thank you this morning. God, simply I thank you for your grace, that you offer it to all of us here, and that it doesn't run out, God, and that we have it. So, God, I pray that we would all, first off, receive that grace from you. Receive it humbly, to know we didn't earn it, God, but that we have it because you love us. And I pray we would look at how we respond to it, that we would be grateful to you for what you provided. And God, that when we see it in the lives of others, we'd be excited about it for them, that we'd be grateful that you also show grace to those around us. We would celebrate that, we'd be encouraged by it and not jealous of it. So God, I pray that for all of us here, we'd be reminded of your grace, we would accept your grace, and we'd respond to it with grace. Thank you again for this morning. In your name.